Welcome to Behind the Build. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have with me two principals and founders of Denegri Bessai Studio. I have Maria Denegri and Tom Bessai. Welcome to Behind the Build.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure.
It's a great, cozy space.
Good to be here.
Everyone describes it. It's a tiny little space of like 8.5 by 8.5 feet, and we're pretty much like on top of each other.
Well, we fit. It's not bad.
We've got some freshly brewed coffee, and we are ready to talk about your practice. So every now and again, I have two people on, and so I'm never really sure who to start the questions with, but I'll start Maria.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Maria, you told me over lunch that the two of you met in BC.
Yes, in architecture school.
Yeah.
Actually.
So prior to going to architecture school, I know that you've heard some of the other people I've spoken with. What led you to BC?
Well, I'm originally from Argentina.
Yeah.
My parents moved to Canada in the 70s.
Okay.
So as a young child, I didn't have an option of where I was going to land. Vancouver was where they came. My father was looking to specialize in medicine, and Vancouver was a pretty good research center. My mother also told him she wouldn't move to the States, which was the other option.
Okay.
So from Argentina, we moved to Canada. And 1 year turned into 2. Then we went back to Argentina thinking that was it. It was a nice experience. We got put in English school so that we wouldn't forget the English we learned. And then a year later, we were back.
Okay.
So that was it. So I grew up in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a natural progression to go to UBC.
Yes, it was. I wasn't always going to go into architecture. I was definitely interested in the arts, but also the sciences were a big draw.
Okay.
My father's a doctor. I naturally thought I was going to be a doctor.
Interesting.
And then the art side pulled stronger than the science side.
And how did your parents fare with that decision?
I think they were okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Architecture is a profession.
Yes, it is.
So, yes. And not that they would have a say in it, really, at the end of the day. But yeah, so I met Tom in my first year at school.
Okay.
He was already there.
And Tom, what led you there?
I grew up in Edmonton, and I did my first university degree at University of Alberta.
Yep.
In like general arts. I did some industrial design and wanted to go into architecture. UBC was, I think, a really good choice. At the time there's a school in Calgary. There's no architecture school in Edmonton, but UBC was a pretty good school, and I headed over there and started into the what became a master's program. But at the time that Maria and I studied, it was an undergrad, so the professional degree at UBC. I was a couple of years ahead of Maria, so I was kind of in my second, third year when she started, and that's how we met. We met in the first year that she began her studies there. So yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, it was love at first sight. This was a long time ago, Jonathan.
That's okay. It's still love.
Really?
And yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Right. I think there are very few people that are running practices in the city that are partners in life and partners in profession, and so it's a true testament of what the relationship is. So it would have to be love at first sight to be able to maintain it.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I know we've been at it for quite some time.
Many years. Yeah.
So, but you weren't together when you completed your master's programs, right? Or were you? Because you didn't stay at UBC for your master's, right?
No. I did my master's in Spain, in Barcelona, and Tom did his in LA. But yes, we were married when we did the master's.
You were married.
Yes. So we got married. I finished my first degree in architecture, the bachelor, and then I think that summer got married. And
really?
We did a kind of late honeymoon a year after. We started working right away. And then the intent was always that we would go away for our graduate degrees.
Yeah.
While I was at UBC, I did a studies abroad with Andrew Gruft in Barcelona, and I fell in love with the city. I also met at the time Ignacio Sola Morales, who was the director of the program that I did.
Incredible.
And it was just, when there's people that inspire you and you are in awe when they speak. And so as I was convinced that I wanted to study with him, right? So that was kind of what led us there.
And how long was that?
It was a 2-year program because it was a our bachelor degrees were in essence professional degrees.
Right.
Which is what the master is today, right? So this was a 2-year post-professional degree.
Okay.
And we took a year off our work. We traveled. We made all the applications, and
Hold on
I
a
said,
second. Hold on. You can't just jump over the travel because like I thought was a huge part of the development of the relationship.
Well, hang on. Like when she went to Barcelona with her class, with Andrew Gruft, it's just some of these people have become pretty prominent architects in the country. Like there was a great group of them, and they just loved Barcelona. They all did, and of course Maria, being a Spanish speaker, was kind of she was a bit of a leader in the group. She was like a linchpin in there.
Like,
let's go. Let's make sure there's a spot for Maria. So not only did she fall in love with the city, but she really was, she was quite instrumental in their whole time there. Right. So I had finished school already, and I just booted it over there after I was working with an office in Vancouver, and I wanted to get over there and just. I had this idea that Maria it wouldn't be long before she picked up with some cool Catalan dude. And lo and behold, there were the likes of Joan and Miguel Angel, and they were all kind of circling this group of Canadians. And so I had to get over there. But anyway, I
ran and swam.
I ran over there. Exactly. But no, it was their studies were quite interesting. And that's in the city, Barcelona at that time. This was the very early 90s. The Catalans had just kind of regained some control over their government and their education system, et cetera. And there was a real push at that time for them to revitalize the city of Barcelona. And they started to do that in interesting ways. And it was a very compelling city. And these guys studying over there were just loving it. And those were earlier times. Like one of the studio projects that they had to set up, one of the students set up on the site itself in this quite beat up part of the city to do his sketches and drawings like right on the site.
Really?
So there was stuff like that going on. It was a bit of a different era. But anyway, we both really loved Barcelona. And so we were married soon after that. And we were making plans to go back there. And Maria I'll let you tell this because you like to tell this, but just before she was accepted
I got accepted in the program. And then a week later, I thought I was, hungover, but it ended up being that, no, I was pregnant. So, yeah. So that was not planned. It wasn't that we were going to have children and then go to grad school. It was let's go to grad school and then have our children. Yeah. But
love is love.
So yes, we told you it was love at first sight. But so I wrote to Ignacio Sola Morales and say, hey, can you defer my acceptance? And he said, yeah, we'll wait for you. And so we came back to Canada. We had our first child, and then 9 months later, we moved to Spain with a 9-month-old.
Wow.
And I did a graduate degree.
That is amazing.
It was actually a real door opener. Like the fact that
incredible.
we were a young family. We had this little kid. He was,
blonde,
1 year old.
blue-eyed. You know what a blonde, blue-eyed baby gets you in Spain? It opens up a lot of doors.
All access pass. No, but I mean, the kid. He was so. But it really forced us to kind of. We lived in a little neighborhood in Gracia, and it kind of. We were in the plaza all the time. We ended up putting Santi into daycare, and so all of a sudden we were like just this regular, everyday, local. Family, and it opened up a lot of doors. Actually, we became very.
How old are you at this point?
We were in our mid-20s.
Yeah, 27,
mid-20s,
27, 26.
We were in our mid to late 20s.
I mean, this is unbelievable.
But I mean, we just didn't really have a choice. We really wanted to go, and it was such a great opportunity.
I was going to say the opportunity.
So
itself.
we just took the kid with us, and it was actually so fun. Like Maria in her program in Barcelona, the students were very interesting people from all over the world.
International program. So there was I met people from Italy, from South America, because at the time the program was instructed in Spanish, so you did have to speak Spanish.
Right.
The program has since become quite international, and so now instruction's in English, right? And so they are attracting a lot more North American students as well as Northern European students.
Right.
But I mean, one of the things that was quite fun is that over there, compared to North America, like having a little kid around wasn't such a problem if you were going to parties and doing things. And so we would meet our friends in the plaza, and our son was like kind of crashed in his stroller next to the patio, and it was all really manageable in a certain way and very fun. And while she was studying, I had to get a job, which I did with a pretty good firm in Barcelona. There was a couple of architects that we were really tracking over there, like as good students do, and we were very much. I mean, I think it's a theme throughout our earlier years together when we were just getting going as architects. Like wherever we would go, we would definitely seek out what we thought were the best and most interesting architects and try to meet them, et cetera. So that was the case for sure in Barcelona. And there was a guy who's since died. He died in about 2001, I think. But Enric Miralles, who's a very famous Catalan architect. He's maybe the most important. I mean, I would say he's maybe the most important architect in that from the contemporary period from the city. And we were really excited about his work, and we would kind of see his lectures and go to his studio once in a while. But unfortunately, like, it was just not affordable to work for him. He paid like very, very little. So we managed to I got a job with some of his colleagues who did quite interesting work. And it was apropos because they were doing urban revitalization vis-a-vis these kind of small urban spaces. That was quite a focus in those years.
This was a seed in your mind, in your
yeah.
We'll get there
for sure. Yeah. So, and it was a great opportunity to do these very dynamic projects. So there was Maria studying with these very cool students, but her professors were super interesting, and they're of course like fully ensconced in the kind of urban experience, taking people to all of these various locations. And so we were very, it was very immersive. We loved it.
This is the exact word I was going to use to describe it.
Yeah.
And in order to just kind of hold the line with Maria, I of course was like madly learning Spanish the whole time I was there. We were there. We had at one point in the year previous when she was there with the students, we got to know a bunch of European students, Germans and Dutch people. And they were so good with languages. They were just like reeling off whatever in Italian, in Spanish, and some of them were even learning Catalan. So there was no excuse. I had to really like pick up with the Spanish, or else it would have been like over.
So Tom, what did you get up to today? Oh,
I was just studying my verbs.
I was with my tutor. We were going over everything.
Oh yeah. There was no Duolingo back then, but I was like, I had books. I was studying away. Anyway, it kind of worked out.
So you were there did you stay
years.
beyond the 2 years?
No, we were there.
Yeah.
We were there for 2 years, and then because in the last year, Tom started all his applications to go to grad school. So the thought was, okay, let's put me through school first.
Yeah. And then
you
had to sort of do it one after the other.
And then,
at that point, you've got the child, right?
And then Tom would do it after. And so Tom got accepted at UCLA.
Well, but we really like tried to figure out where to go next, actually, because we kind of wanted to go to London, England, maybe. And there was a couple of schools that were of real interest there. The Bartlett was one that I applied to. But we ended up choosing to go to LA, which we were very, very nervous about at the time. By this time, it was like the mid to later 90s. And by the time we moved there, I guess it was like 96, 97. But
was it?
Yeah.
To
LA. So I went to UCLA, which was, it turned out to be, frankly, it was a very exciting time in LA for architecture, and on the one hand, and then on the other, as I say, we were very nervous about moving to LA. Like, it wasn't long after there'd been some fairly major riots in the city.
Oh.
We were very nervous.
Yeah, I remember.
And I remember one of your sister's friends who was showing us around when we just arrived there. He was just like, don't go to this neighborhood. And if you're looking for a place to live, don't live over there. But we did land fairly well. It turned out that LA was very livable, actually. And we had, our young son at this point. He was a little bit older. Yeah. So we landed in kind of UCLA student housing, which was very, it wasn't like architecturally super interesting, but like a lot of young families, other people.
Vibrant. The vibrant.
It was great. Yeah. And so, that was also, and then while we were there, so I started in at UCLA for this post-professional degree, and Maria, it was her turn to get a job. And so she found a really interesting job with these super cool young architects and landscape architects that had this collective.
It was a collective. So they shared space. It was 6 different offices, and they all did a variety of things. So they all studied architecture together, but then one went into fashion, the other went into marketing and graphic design. there was an architect firm. I worked for a husband and wife team, and they were landscape architect and architecture. So it was super interesting because I think it started to further solidify this interest of relationship of building and site, inside and out, which is kind of, I think, plays a pretty important role in our work.
It is the role.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, for my own part, the UCLA at that time, alongside SciArc, there were some very pioneering kind of digital explorations going on at that time there. So I studied with Greg Lynn, and this woman, Sylvia Lavin, was quite an important kind of figure in history and theory at the time. But there was a really quite vibrant discourse going on around kind of use of technology in architecture at that time. And also, I mean, as a sort of a sidebar, like some very enduring architects were around as well. Like Tom Main was teaching there at the time. I mean, a couple of my colleagues from UCLA were there specifically to study with Tom Main. So, and then for my own part, I became more conversant and quite interested in the discussion around technology and architecture at that time through those.
And what did that look like? Like, what was the major conflict that people felt was happening between architecture and technology?
Well, I would say in the late 90s, it became more and more clear that these digital tools were around to stay, and that people were starting to use them in much more experimental ways. So Greg Lynn was particularly interested in sort of co-opting certain types of graphic software for the purpose of design, or animation software. So that was quite exciting. So there was a time when the program that's now Maya, it was this alias Wavefront. It was still not kind of fully formed as the software that it became. And it was just this open-ended animation software with, it wasn't really so much graphics, but rather it was within the 3D environment. You would have various aspects like gravity, forces, etc. So it was a very dynamic kind of environment that was always imagined as an animation environment, but there was many people kind of tinkering around with how you might use this as a kind of a live design space. So the idea of iterations and in terms of these digital tools became quite an important the framework around how you would design using these tools was on the table in some interesting ways. And at this time as well, because at this point, I mean, as of 2024, we really are in a kind of moment of there's AI and there's all of these, there's really a lot of more questions than there are answers as to how the current very powerful tools will not really infect, but will affect architectural work.
Yeah.
But at that time and there, it was a free space for ideas. So whereas Greg Lynn was very interested in the translation of these quite kind of dramatic and curvaceous geometries into physical objects. So there was an early interest in digital fabrication tools. Many of his colleagues and the various professors around, there was a guy named Carl Chu that was quite cool in this regard in SciArc. All he really wanted to talk about and do was digital work that was purely digital, designed through algorithms. So these terms and this discussion was very, very protean. It was
early 200s. Early 2000s.
No, but this was Carl Chu. He'd sit there in the reviews and he'd we're not going to even talk about building anything. It's just going to be this. We're really more interested in the kind of the virtual.
Right.
And so it was a very exciting time, actually. And there was a lot of, really what there was a lot of a certain amount of naivety and a lot of idealism, but at the same time, some foundations for things that certainly for me became, touchstones in future.
I was going to say, if my understanding of where you are now, it sounds like a lot of what you experienced then really laid the foundations for what you're looking to work with now.
Definitely.
So you were. How long were you in LA?
We were in LA a little longer, actually, because
we really liked it.
Yeah, we ended up that you do hear that saying you either love LA or you hate LA, and we loved LA.
It was working well for us,
and I think that if we had made it work, if we had found a way to make it work financially, we may have stayed. Because the other thing that also was very exciting about LA is that it is. it's an environment where, as a young upstart, you have opportunity, right? The models around procurement are a lot more risk. There's a lot more risk taking. Oh, you mean you haven't done 5 libraries before? Well, we'll give you a chance, right? That's something that you don't come by that easily.
Yeah, I had that discussion with a few people.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So that was
But
kind
it's
of
also,
exciting.
I mean, LA was pretty international, that there are a lot of people dropping in there
Super
from different parts of the world.
Right.
And so we were able to really, take part in that. I mean, there were local people, but at the same time, a lot of the kind of discourse was being infused by like voices coming from far away, different. It was pretty international.
Yeah.
So we really got a kick out of that, and we're having.
So we
quite a
were in
fun
LA.
time
I
with
think
it.
we were in LA probably 3.5, 4 years. I can't.
Well, one of the things, like I ended up getting a job
he
at
ended
Frank
up
Gary's
getting
office,
work.
which was a goal. Having done some UCLA, I'm like, I think it'd be really cool to work for Frank.
I was able to work through the NAFTA agreement, right? So I would get a work visa. I would renew it annually.
We really were sort of set out that
We were
could
pretty
stick
much
around
set
there.
up. Our second child was born in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
South
Yeah,
American
yeah.
citizen. Dual
But-
citizenship.
I mean, one of the things was, we had a really good run there, and it was
Yeah.
very exciting and interesting, and we met a lot of great people. But we also, having our kids starting to grow up a little bit, we started to think, well, if we did go back to Canada, one of the things was our oldest kid was getting close to grade 1 age, and we thought, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to go back and give them a really good public education in Canada. And so for us, like the obvious return spot would have been Vancouver. Like we'd been living there before we went off to do all these things. And certainly there's a lot of really great architects and architecture in Vancouver, as you probably know, and you're probably going to interview many of these architects one of these days as things
I've
move
got
along.
a few feelers out there.
Yeah. No, it's a great culture for architecture. And it's the West Coast in general. It's the climate, it's a little bit more amenable to more experimental ways of building.
Well, and the geography. The geography there is completely different than
Totally.
our flatland here.
Yeah.
But I mean, despite ourselves, we thought, well, maybe we should try something a little bit different. And we had a couple of
Shocking.
Sorry?
Shocking.
No, we have a couple of my brothers had been living in Toronto.
Yeah.
And one of them was still around, and he's like, you guys should really give a shot to Toronto. It's a great city. It's like really coming up in so many ways. And so we did a feeler trip here to try to check it out to Toronto. And we did. We really liked it. Also one of the things that was kind of percolating behind the scenes for us was, having done all these things, we really were quite interested in teaching, and we hadn't done any teaching particularly up until that point. And we thought, it would be great to get a spot and get a chance to have a kind of a period of our careers that's really kind of focused on academics and just continuing to in these discussions that we were so interested in. And
to
so,
help influence other people that are running in this, right?
Yeah.
Take all the knowledge you've gained and experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we got that opportunity in Toronto. Like I got an offer to join the U of T faculty as a kind of adjunct, just because you see this happening. Like there we were young, we were coming from LA, we'd just been in Barcelona. It's like, okay, well, we got to get these guys plugged in. So we got a bit plugged in at U of T, which was great. And at that time, a very receptive environment, really elite faculty at U of T architecture at that time and ongoing. I mean, it's a really great school. Now the Daniels Faculty of Architecture. So we got a little foothold in there and we really got into it. I have to say, loved teaching. And just, the routine of it was also fairly, it was quite, we had little kids. Yeah. It's hard to, 9 to 5 is super challenging, et cetera. So the university schedule also offered us a way of like having time with our family, So, and the summer is like 4 months. It's unbelievable having that many months where you're not actually in the classroom.
Well, you're supposed to be.
I know you're doing research. I know.
And writing and getting published.
Yeah. But, so Marie, we had a phase of our careers where the focus, not so much the focus, because we had a practice at an early stage, even when we were teaching, but it was a nice way to have a practice and give it some time to percolate and for our ideas to evolve, where the mainstream of our work really was teaching. And I think we had this kind of academic aspect to our lives. So that was really, that's how things sort of got going for us here in Toronto.
Yeah. What I feel like would have been beneficial to any of the staff you would eventually bring in is that you also have a mind of how can we help generate the best people that we bring in here. Generate is the wrong word. How can we help influence and
Oh yeah, mentor.
mentor. I use this word empower, like empower
Yeah,
people
that's a
to
good
be
word.
able to maximize their abilities, right?
Yeah.
The introspective way of looking at things you describe. So what year did you formalize the studio?
We
Well-
we got our certificate of practice.
I mean, it began like
2013.
Maria got.
But I
herself
actually, I
licensed
got my
first.
license in 2008.
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
And
We had been kind of
Yeah.
remiss. We should have got ourselves licensed
Oh.
years before, but we
Yes.
didn't really need to.
Yeah,
And
you were
well,
working.
no,
Yeah, and we were teaching.
the focus was primarily teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, we would teach extensively all year, and then work on projects in the summer on the side, right?
Yeah, we had.
But
in
it
those
was,
earlier
but
years, we had some projects that we were doing.
my getting licensed in 2008 was partly driven by that there was a little bit more interest in what we had to offer as a firm. We were getting a few more kind of bites in terms of clients, and so it's like, okay, maybe it's time to go out on our own, right? So
Yeah,
and Tom was pretty heavily involved at school, so I basically got my license.
Well, Maria
first.
did the right
Yeah.
thing. She got herself licensed, and then she was able to sort of have a.
And then Tom worked for me.
It
Tom
began
worked
as
for me
Maria
for-
Denegri,
yeah.
architect.
Yeah, there it is.
Let's go.
Yes, it was Maria
Tom became
Denegri.
my first employee.
Yeah. Tom was my first employee.
Get back to
Right.
work.
Here's your first performance review, Tom.
Oh my goodness. It's not going well, I'm sorry to say.
You're sleeping on the couch tonight.
That's right. You can't get paid for sleeping on the couch. But we what I also wanted to comment though, like when we came to Toronto at first, I mean, even then it's quite an expensive city. We were young and had quite a bit of energy. We had our university stuff, but we both worked for different firms when we arrived here, kind of part-time on and off. Like I had a run at Taylor Hazel Architects.
Yeah.
Which was actually pretty interesting. Like they just did some really intense restoration work, and they were interested in heritage. And there was there was some really important lessons coming from there as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard to keep it going in terms of the teaching load and the family life, etc. But I did have a stint at Taylor Hazel, and Maria worked for a period of time when we
With
had just arrived.
Farrow Architects. Ty
Farrow.
So it was
Oh yeah, and then Kearns
yeah.
Mancini.
And Kearns Mancini later.
Yeah.
So I got registered through with Kearns Mancini.
I mean, for us, it was important to try to kind of find
Bigger
our
projects,
way
right?
amongst the local architects as much as we could. So we have an ongoing relationship with Jonathan Kearns, for example, from Kearns Mancini. And yeah, no, the fact is there's some really great offices that we were able to work with and when we were just kind of getting going here. And then as we got more established and we were more settled, Maria got herself registered and we were able to sort of hang a shingle, as it were. Even though we were still within the, let's say, the kind of parenthesis of the university. As you can imagine, there's a lot of firms that they sort of start out that way. They're teaching, but they have a practice on the side, and they gradually kind of like find their form as a practice. So that was more or less our
There have been others that have been at big firms, and they start trying to take on. They've got some small project in the family that someone wants to take on. The next thing you know, they love it, and they leave and they go out on their own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there was a period of time where we were really, things were quite stable and interesting, where we had all this academic, kind of the vitality of the academic scene on the one hand, but having a practice on the other. We always kind of had a practice, but it allowed us to do projects they weren't pro bono projects by any means, but they were projects that we weren't as, in the earlier days of our work, like when we were working under Maria's license, we could do a project and it was more of a sidebar to our main income teaching.
Right.
So we weren't as concerned about the business side of the practice, which I suppose is, we've had to learn more and more. We arrived at a more proper practice model later in life.
It's actually one of the things that I was debating whether or not to discuss with you.
How old you are.
Was given the background in teaching.
Yeah.
Don't you think at this stage that it would be so vital to incorporate something within the curriculum, I mean, across the country, but potentially across North America, about the business of running an architecture practice? Because from everyone that I speak to, these courses are really, really strong at being able to give people an understanding of what architecture is and how to work in it. but they don't tell you how to run a practice.
How to run a practice.
Yeah. Like a small business side to.
I mean, it's a really good point. But I have to say, and this is it's not such a great position to take on that issue. But I mean, one of the things I became quite convinced of, and I sort of still am now even, is that in a certain way, studying architecture at the university level is about exploration, experimentation, etc. You know, we were really teaching students about kind of critical thinking and about history. And there was a lot of discussion, you know, in teaching architecture, there's a lot of reference to various current and historical projects. So there's a lot of precedent work that gets done. And then to my comment from earlier, like the idea that like technologies are starting to infuse the way we work. And in practice, it's very hard to really harness some of these technologies because you really do have a bottom line. Whereas if you have a quote academic practice, you can do a lot of experimental stuff. So in our early work, there's always a really cool project. And then inside that project is some feature thing. So whether it be a feature wall or like a ceiling piece or something. Exactly. And a lot of that stuff that we were doing in the mid 2000s, it was so interesting to do, but it was very much, it was a kind of like us with our hands on the machines and our own students who were doing the fabrication work and the assembly, et cetera, et cetera. So we were always like, we got really kind of excited about that aspect of practice, in that it's a real practice in that we're doing actual projects for people, but we get to continue to kind of infuse those projects with these beautiful pieces that were really, you know, not available for most architects to even do because it's just not part of their bottom line. Right. They don't really have the knowledge in these kind of experimental techniques. And so we ran on that for a little while. And I became quite convinced that really that was the essence of architecture school, was teaching people some of these new things, critical thinking. These days, it's become a little bit different. There's much more, and I think a proper interest in ecology, diversity, inclusion, all those things are happening in the schools now.
The themes of education have maybe shifted a little bit. But I mean, I think to go back to your question, I think you're interested in maybe trying to understand why the schools might not focus on giving students a few more practical skills. Yeah. It's a tough question. It's a tough question to answer, because I think in part I do agree with what Tom is saying. Like the role of the school is to give the students the tools to apply critical thinking, to problem solving, and creativity. Yeah. And it is a forum and a place of inquiry. And I think that if a good professor gives you the tools and empowers you to think and question, right? As an accredited program, there are a few courses and that all the schools are required to offer, and one of them is, it's a practice. It's called professional practice, right? Yeah. You have the OAA will bring someone in. You get a lesson on the kind of insurance. You get the Pro-Demni comes in and does a lecture. So you expose the students to, okay, this is what it takes. This is what happens. This is, even expose them to what a change order is and all that stuff. Right. It's, being engaged with students to this day, you still do kind of recall your own experience as a student. And it's, it goes in your one ear and out the other. Yeah, fair. Like it's just, you can't grasp it until you are in a position where you have to grasp it. Got it. And I'm pretty convinced that you get the necessary exposure, but it's only until you're in it that you actually start to understand, okay, this is how it works. Like you can understand conceptually what a change order is, but until you've done one like four times, you still aren't going to get it, right? Right. So,
but I think it is a bit of a problem in academia. Like we would tend to say, you'll learn about practice when you go out to work. Yeah. And some of the schools, like Maria and I have taught quite extensively across various of the schools in Ontario. Like we had a run, especially Maria at Carleton teaching similar curricula, et cetera, but also at Waterloo. Waterloo has a slightly more established, as it's reputable for in other disciplines, co-op programs. Yes. So their architecture students, they after a year or two of study, they go out, they work, they come back, they study more, and they work again. We found that those students, like as a practice, that those students had really great, professional or office skills. They had a bit of a better understanding even while they were finishing their degree of what was happening
Which would make sense.
in the working world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that was
different.
I think, the co-op is something that
it's a good model for sure.
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
for sure. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
So okay. So tell me. So you officially become your practice.
Denegri Bessai Studio in 2013.
Yeah.
So
You said Tom's last name so fast.
Let's just get it out there. You could say Bessai, Tom Bessai.
Yeah.
But I'm supposed to say Tom Bessai because
Yeah.
it is the proper pronunciation.
That's right. And I want to make sure we said that.
You did.
I
Jonathan, you did.
I did.
And Maria,
I did,
absolutely,
yeah.
of course.
So 2015, it becomes official, and I know that there has been a progression over the last 9 years of the practice.
Yeah.
Next year is going to be your 10-year anniversary running the practice.
Well,
no,
it was
2013.
Oh,
So
13.
Yeah,
13.
we're-
I was all
Yeah,
The big,
no,
the
so
big
we're-
11-year.
We're 11 years old.
We
as a
should have a
practice,
kind of
I
anniversary
guess.
thing.
Okay, so
I know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
We didn't have a big party. I know everyone celebrates.
We
but-
should have done something. We had our heads down. We were at our
Can I
desks.
tell you, you should just do something because you're 11 years.
I know, right?
You totally should.
We will.
I
We'll
know.
do that.
You
I
should
know.
just have a fun little thing with like
Yeah.
some of your close
11.
friends. Let's
Yeah.
celebrate 11 years.
Yeah, that's right.
For sure. We have, we've stayed small.
Yeah.
That is something that, and I don't think we are, interested in growing much bigger.
So how many staff?
So there's four of us,
Yeah.
including the two of us. And what we do is
Currently, there's 4, but it's
Currently
kind of
there's 4.
oscillated.
it's
We've
been
had-
the biggest we've been was at one point we were 8 people, I
And
think.
then including yourselves.
Yeah.
That includes us, yes.
We have various people that are working in the background. Like we have a tech, support, and we
Yeah,
have
but
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
support and stuff.
Yeah. But it's not
And
fun.
we,
No, of course.
we participate in various internship programs that the university offers, and so we'll have students that come into the office for 6 weeks as part of a curriculum,
Yeah.
and then they'll stay on for the summer. But last week was the last week of a couple of the interns
Yeah.
are off to go to school.
Like one of the things, like we are a bit like hooked up on the university kind of model and system. So we know a lot of students. We
Yeah.
have long relationships with students. What's quite exciting about that is like if you've been teaching for 10 or 15 years, like there's these people that have been out of school for 10 or 15 years that are now like fully fledged architects. And their colleagues, and so that's always quite exciting. But we have had, generally speaking, though, we've hired people from from U of T actually for the most part, our own students, I guess.
Yeah. Well, because you also
And-
know them, you know their work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have
know
a
what you're
relationship
gonna
with them over
There's a
sometimes years
exactly.
before they even
Right.
sort of step into the office, and so
There's
that's been-
there is a relationship of trust and mentorship that starts in the classroom and then actually continues. It's something that we have definitely both enjoyed a lot.
yeah, no, and it's worked out quite well.
But
Because
yeah.
people do eventually figure out exactly what is happening in practice, and so
Yeah.
they're not like students forever, obviously. Yeah.
But in terms of the office evolving a little bit, I think that there was a period when we were both quite engaged with the university, and the types of projects that we were taking on at the time were more fabrication related, or they were there was a lot of installation work.
Yes.
And these were projects that Tom specifically was bringing into the office as an extension or research to the fabrication and digital and computation work that he was doing at school.
Which is what you had alluded to me wanting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Should we have done this at your office?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a thought. But this is, to your point, though, it's a perfectly, legit to be doing this. Like, so you have to just talk about the things. You're not just like showing things because it's not.
I know, because
the show and tell is a whole different thing.
We're so used to actually pointing to things
I
and
know.
take a look. But to
Yes.
describe it in words is a whole different
Yeah.
kind of skill set. Eh?
But I would say what we were getting like at the time, leading into the kind of fully fledged practice, we were getting lots of, we would get residential projects, but we would generally I certainly was looking for an angle to put in some special piece.
Right.
So we'd kind of, the people that we were working for, they're like, that front entry, that'd be a great place for this really elaborate thing. And they're like, oh, really? But they would eventually kind of be able to be convinced. And some people were actually really into it. So I would say it's more of a combination. Like we'd be doing these renovation projects, and then as part of that, at the time we had a fairly trusted contractor that we were working with who was building most of the project we were designing. So they kind of got used to this vibe as well. So like, oh, what are you going to do in this project? And we're like, oh, we're going to do some kind of like birch, strips here that are going to be CNC cut. Yeah. So but a lot of that stuff, there was a little, some of it was almost very interesting formally, but also just, we weren't really sure how some of these pieces were going to be held in place, et cetera. So,
that's at Walden, like that's what we're figuring out all the time on our projects. Like, I don't think we've ever done a project where there's been the same detail on something. And I think that's part of the excitement of being in this business.
Oh yeah.
Is trying to figure it all out. Like there's a problem. Let's figure out what the solution is.
For sure.
Totally.
Yeah. And we're pretty hands-on too. Being small, we draw a lot, but we don't overdraw. Right. So if you're a builder, you're not going to get a drawing set from us that is 100 pages long. Like it's actually going to be pretty concise, but we are on site every other day. And because I think that when you do primarily renovation work, there's only so much you can speculate. You rip open the walls.
I'm very aware.
Oh my gosh! You rip open the walls, and then it's like, okay, we gotta draw this all over again, right?
You walk through the how complicated getting that structure behind us.
I know.
Oh wow!
Constructed was,
I know.
Yeah,
So,
and we're constantly like measuring and remeasuring the space because you never really know. For some of the more precise things that you have to do on interiors, you really just have to.
You have to wait until demo's done.
Absolutely.
You go.
You have to wait till framing.
Well, till framing, and then you measure again. We're always remeasuring. One thing I did want to comment though is that we have had a tradition in the office coming out of this kind of academic work of we have a kind of a methodology around model making and prototyping. So in our office, we do a lot of digital and physical models attendant to the designs that we're working on. So in general, and this is a kind of a process that's been developed over many years by lots of people that are interested in digital design, but you generally are kind of using digital models sometimes as a basis for doing a physical model. So you'll literally use the physical model as a kind of a verification of the geometry.
Right.
Prototypes, I would say, like not necessarily doing things at 1-to-1 because it's very challenging and expensive to do 1-to-1 kind of mock-ups of things, but rather iterative scale models of certain features or elements or spaces until you really start to get an understanding and a feel, not just for at first the smaller models are a bit more like, oh, you can understand the space a bit better, benefits the clients. So you don't just have a digital model, you actually have a physical model that they can kind of poke around in. Yeah. But then from there, that gives way to larger scale models that you can start to use to really kind of verify the structural solution and the more particular aspects of the space. And all the while, these models have like little figures inside them. Like at the end of the day, you really need to have the human figure sitting there, in relationship to whatever it is that you're designing and building. Yeah. So by scaling up these physical models, you eventually get to a point, and they start to become, I would call them prototypes for various more particular complex aspects of a given project. They really become an important kind of background for the real project.
Of course.
And it's a very beautiful moment. It is for every architect and for the builders and for each project when you finally just see what the space is becoming and you're like, yes, we kind of nailed it. But this gives you a bit of assurance that, what you thought you were doing is going to kind of play out.
Actually work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there comes a point when, and for me, it's always a bit sad. There comes a point when the project's like there. So again, I don't want to like name off all the projects by the streets they're on, but there's a project we're doing just south of Bloor Street, a downtown like West Side project. And we had these really intense large scale models for this project. And the clients really loved the models as well. They're like, oh, that's so cool. I think I can imagine the space from this. But then there comes a point when you're in the actual space. And whatever you were modeling is there at that point. And then you're like, oh.
As Tom's describing this, I'm watching Maria smile because like you can see that she's living through this both the model size and then walking through it.
For sure. Well,
But so we have this. It's like a graveyard of physical models in our. It's like it's a fabrication studio.
I was going to say it's the comment about how it's sad. Is for him, it's this moment.
It's a little bit of a kind
it's
of
sad when the model
shed a tear for that.
Is sheds way to the actual real space.
You have to in your studio get a scaled version of Beetlejuice.
Yes.
And put them in
exactly
all these homes that you've designed. You
live in those.
Right? You remember that in the movie?
Oh my goodness. It's a question though, like, because these things get quite large. And so you have to think about what exactly to do with them, etc. We photograph them.
These things get quite large. No.
Poor Maria.
Let's
like,
rephrase
the graveyard of ships. You mean the fabrication lab?
You choose to make them large.
Yeah.
No, but it is actually, it's an incredible design tool.
Yeah.
Like,
well, now there's Instagram though. We can put photographs of the models out on Instagram. Sometimes we do. We're trying to do more of that actually.
Yeah. Like it's hard.
Yeah. It's a lot
especially
of
when you want to
stuff.
focus on being a small studio and what you're going to be able to output from a deliverable standpoint for your clients and for your builders and, working with all the other consultants that you have to, but then also trying to promote your business in some way. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
The model making.
Well, we have some interns that are, we call them jokingly just the interns because they're just, what they are is they're students and they're going to become great architects. Almost each one of them is like, they all have amazing skills, but our sort of just quick is like, oh yeah, let's give that to the interns. And they're there making models, doing digital models.
No, but there's no financial benefit to the model making. It is something that we do because you're passionate about it, because it is part of the process that you have conviction about, and it does actually, no matter how you can walk a client through a simulation, you can allow them to enter your kind of Rhino model and rotate the computer screen. But when they kneel down and look at the kind of physicality of an actual analog model, they get it.
Well, I was just going to say, like you say, there's no monetary, right? But there is, because when you've now gone ahead and developed that little model, a client gets buy-in, which means you now have a project.
Yes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There is the alternative where if they can't actually understand it, it's just like,
then you may not be able to do that crazy thing you want to do.
That's right.
Yes.
You got
sure.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
So in terms of the projects now that you're looking at, so now you're not just getting to do something exciting as an entry, but now your projects are becoming
This has been a big
interesting.
discussion that Maria and I have been having. Is this question of like like conflating these things that were originally kind of fairly cool feature elements into fully developed spaces, and it's good. It's super important, of course. So in the current projects that we're doing, there aren't necessarily like a standalone element here or there. There sometimes are those things. Sometimes people actually want some particular thing just to look at.
Yeah.
But it's generally, we're trying to produce these kind of more dramatic, sometimes more particular to the client's spaces. These kind of idiosyncratic moments are sometimes showing up in the projects, which comes kind of a little bit from this, well, it's a kind of collaborative process between us and our, Maria commented, we currently are really like 4 main people.
Yeah.
We have our kind of current trusted staff are fairly senior, and they kind of get what we're doing, and they have their own, obviously, Michael Bartosik and Alexia Hovis, like they're both really, they have their own passions and obsessions, et cetera, that we entertain, and they kind of have jumped in aboard our own ideas and ways of working. But anyway, those types of projects have given way to more fully fledged spatial explorations and material explorations, I would say.
And how are you coming across, clients, or how are clients coming across you? How have you found that?
That's an interesting question, because I think it's definitely changed, right? It was when we first started, it was very much word of mouth. So you land, and because it was, we were primarily teaching, we'd work on a single project a year, and then that client would pass on our name, and then you'd get another client.
Right.
So it was word of mouth for quite a few years. We were working with one or two builders, and they would bring us projects.
Yeah.
As we grew, and the firm got, and we got our certificate of practice and started actually, okay, we're now an office, right?
Yeah, we're real.
We're real. That certificate of practice.
Let's go build a
you know,
website.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, and then just connections in the city.
Yeah.
We actually get a lot. We get a lot of referrals from some colleagues. So that helps as well. But we have actually we're now in the position where you do have to market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
definitely.
been a shift in the last 2 years where we've noticed that it's the first time. This year is the first time where all our clients are actually younger than we are. It used to be that who can afford an architect, but someone who's actually established and it's the client is driving. Okay, we need to be on Instagram. We need to. It's kind of driving some of the changes we've made in the way we approach marketing and getting our name out there for sure. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah,
but
we're definitely paying attention to that.
So
we have a huge archive of projects that
we
need to-
have 2 current projects right now where because we do ask them, so how'd you hear about us?
Yeah.
If they don't reveal, and it's like, oh well, I saw an article or I was perusing through and you came up on Instagram. So, and that's a first,
Fairly
right?
recently,
Because up until a couple of years ago, it's been either referrals from past clients, referrals from colleagues, right?
Yeah.
We have lots of friends that are, have slightly bigger practices than we are and are doing much bigger work. And if a project comes to them that is, not something they can take on at the time, then we're one of their go-tos, which is excellent.
We've had that. We've had where we have a client and they want us to introduce them to architecture practices, and I'm like, thanks for selecting Walden to build this, but let me go speak to some people I know in this business.
Yeah.
And I'll have that where you go and speak to a practice and they could be too busy at the time and take it on for 3 to 4 months, but a client's really, really excited,
ready to go,
want to get it off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens. So being able to have the inbound leads from colleagues is a really important thing. Yeah, it is. And the transition of like marketing, it is a daunting.
Oh yeah, no,
task.
it's a well. I mean, and then a couple of things. Like a few years ago, we had a guy in the office he's kind of heads up the Toronto Society of Architects now, Joel Leon, and he, with Joel, we kind of put our shoulder into it and actually got a couple of RFPs. So we ended up over the last few years getting some institutional work. So we've done a couple of projects at U of T. We've kind of figured out it just takes so much kind of preparation and it's so competitive, but we managed to get a couple of projects through an RFP process. And so we are working on that and attempting to kind of keep that moving. So there's that as well. It's the way that many architects, bigger firms in particular, but find their work. Like there's lots of advertisements of what needs to get done out there, and you kind of get into the competitive realm of putting your stuff forward. But it's also quite hard to get one if you haven't done one.
Right.
So now we'll
eventually get to that point where actually we have done 5.
We've done enough institutional stuff now that we'll get, if we put our minds to it, we'll get more. But and then on top of that, we're formalizing a lot of the kind of marketing side. So we are, trying to keep our Instagram going. We realize that that's super important. We have a publicist has a very kind of good strategy for putting projects out there when they're ready, and not too many at a time. This kind of thing. Yeah. So we're getting a little bit savvy on that. It's pretty challenging, all that.
And Maria, you were also on the board for the Toronto Society of Architects?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm now,
She's
I guess past chair, right?
She is, the chair.
I was the chair of the Toronto Society of Architects 6 years ago, I think. It's already been 6 years. Yeah. So now I'm on the executive board.
That was a great experience. Really great colleagues, a lot of advocacy work.
I mean, Meg Graham brought me on to the TSA, and I was kind of looking to get involved with a group of architects that were passionate about architecture.
Yeah, for sure.
Were passionate about talking about architecture. And
urban
I was
issues.
an urban issue, and I was actually also very interested in kind of just building collegiality, right, among peers. And like I got hooked and was there pretty active for like over 12 years, right?
That's amazing.
So now I'm on, what is it? The advisory board. That's what happens when you graduate from being a chair.
You don't get to leave.
That's right.
You
never quite leave.
You never leave. No, you don't want to leave. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
And they also do some pretty, what I've looked at, they do some pretty fun interactive experiences for those that are involved.
Yeah.
Sure. And also some public programming. Like there's a lot of lectures and building tours. It's become quite sophisticated and kind of trying to get the word out about architecture and urbanism. So, yeah.
So where do you see at this point, like where do you see and how do you see the practice evolving from here forward? Do you see yourselves wanting to pursue more in the institutional space, in the public space?
I feel that's a really we don't really have a good answer for that but we talk about it a lot and we're wondering about it and working on that question. I would say one of the things that I just want to take us back one step during COVID with some colleagues, not really all architects, but some friends and colleagues that we had common interests. We started a company which became a little sidebar to our architecture practice we called it Macro Space. Yeah. And this little company, there was a real need during COVID for people like yourself, Jonathan, like having some space that's not your house where you can do things like scream or have a Zoom meeting, which didn't even really exist before, the idea of that so much before COVID. So and I had quite a bit of interest and experience in this kind of prefabrication, digital fabrication, et cetera. So we put all of our minds together and figured out this perfect solution for people, which was, we thought at the time, these micro buildings that would be prefabricated, that would be modular, that we could put up in a relatively affordable way, but have very high quality.
Right.
So we pursued this, and that it eventually played itself out. We did about 10 buildings. Some of them were really the problem. Our Achilles heel, frankly, with macro space at the time was that we were just so, as architects, we were never content to do the same building twice. We always wanted to do something different and something new. And so these things just became,
not surprised?
They were built off of this chassis that was quite, modular, and it was always the same, but everything was always changing.
It can be improved. We can make this better.
So that thing though, it looms large in our thinking about our planning for the future. Like we have this experience for doing these ADUs, these that we're very good at. And we, obviously we made a lot of mistakes, some of them more financial, like with our open heart, we kind of offered these things too cheap. And so they should have been a little bit more pricey, but at the same time, we made some beautiful buildings, and the people that we did them for are generally, I think, quite still very excited about these little buildings in their property. But it was very much a stepping stone towards the world that we feel like we're in now, where we're quite expert at like urban residential work. We've done a ton of single family, but really, as you know, like there's this whole climate around the zoning and getting doing kind of proper planning within the urban context for the possibility of, let's say, a family who owns a house, having their parents live there, having their kids grow up and maybe continue to live on the site. So these multi kind of generational projects.
Definitely.
We're really interested in that. And I think we're quite good at that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've
done a few of those.
Yeah.
It's really interesting when you get involved in those types of projects.
I mean, most of our projects, I would say almost all the projects.
Many of them,
we do have an aspect of, versatility to them. Like we design with the idea that this building needs to last longer than the immediate needs of the family in the current space, right?
Yeah.
So they come to you with a renovation idea that is specific to their needs today.
Yeah.
And then they're not thinking 15 years ahead, right?
Or with us, they come and we do start to talk, because everyone has this notion that, what if my parents have to come and live on the site? Or what are my kids going to do? I mean, we definitely we like this space of design where we're dealing with people in that way, where, and one of the things like in our residential work, I mean, the projects are very intimate. Like you spend years with your clients, you get to know them really well, and you kind of work through all of these difficult and very expensive decisions with them. And so what we've become quite interested in is like, certainly there's like the quality of the spaces, these things, these sort of sometimes sensational moments in projects where the light is coming in, et cetera, beautiful material expression, et cetera. There's those things, but really there's also this idea that we can design spaces that are versatile enough that people can start to use them in different ways over different periods of their their lives. And so we're quite interested in that. And I would say that ties into a slightly larger scale ambition that we have of doing, proper multi-unit housing in the city. So we have had an opportunity to do this 3 buildings, 9 unit project for U of T, which is like a faculty housing project, which has been great. And we want to kind of continue to try on our, work at that scale, slightly larger than the individual multi-generational house and outbuildings, but also, housing, I think would be very, we're actively looking for projects like that, but at the same time, I feel like we're quite comfortable and excited, and there's more projects to do in the kind of idiom that we're working like right now with the team that we have. I mean, we feel like we're becoming quite, we've settled nicely in a niche around some of the single family, as I say, this multi-generational, often but single family kind of projects.
I mean, the idea of multi-unit housing or city building, right? Just how do you build and address the kind of the current questions that are coming up, burning the city right now,
burning questions.
I mean, we occupy a building that my family owns, and we are trying to figure out, okay, how do I buy this building from my father, because I can't convince someone who is looking at ways to retire to, okay, let's get involved in more risk and and do this and do a huge reno. So no, I mean, so I think we're talking right now about, okay, we're going to sell our family house so that we can actually buy this building and then figure out how do we develop this property and use it as a case study. I mean, we could put in easily 4 apartments and then have our office at the back. You don't get walk-in clientele in an architecture studio. We don't need the storefront. The storefront can be something that can actually provide an amenity and a service.
Generate something for the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So there's all this thinking that we're excited about even trying on our own site. It's just that we gotta get there.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, it has been like a pleasure talking about all this stuff with you. I'm actually astonished that we have covered so much ground from one side of the world to the other.
Right.
I know.
And the education and the growth of the practice. I appreciate you coming and talking about all of this. I got to say, I want to continue the conversation at another time, talking about what that might look like with the building and the process.
Definitely.
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure, yeah.
Well, it's been fun. It's not often that we get to kind of trace back the steps. How did we get here?
How did we get
Because
How did we get to this little room here?
I sent you a calendar invite.
That's right.
Right.
Oh my God.
Tom was getting iced coffee when we first spoke. And yet here we are, and we just finished some coffee throughout the discussion today.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
for participating in this. It's been great, and you've gave me so many names that I have to go research now.
Oh, good.
Excellent.
Well, and Jonathan, just from our part, I mean, I think it's a great initiative that you're doing this, and it's super interesting. So I encourage you to keep it up. I mean, it's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun. Thanks for the opportunity.